Welcome to Thinking Tackle. I'm Adam Penning. Now let me take you back in time. The date, October 1984. The magazine, The Angling Times, and one of the most famous photographs of a carp that was ever produced. The fish in question, basil, probably the most famous carp, certainly of modern times. The angler, Richie McDonald, and the lake, right here, Yateley North Lake, which from that point on left its mark on modern carp fishing. I've never been here before, and because it is such a famous place, it's somewhere I've always wanted to come and fish. The fishing here has never been easy. Historically, it's been very low stock. The fish have grown very big. It's very weedy. The guest I've got with me is perfect for catching carp in that kind of environment. He's a master of it, and he's also been involved in some of the recent history of Yateley North Lake, as it's actually been reborn from what it used to be. In the old days, maybe had 6 or 7 fish. Now there's a new generation of fish which have grown almost as big as the famous basil did. So it's a very exciting one. It's going to be a challenge. We could easily blank. We might have bitten off more than we can chew. It's a tough venue, but we're going to introduce you to this lake. You can all have a good look at it, see how we fish it, and let's see what we get. Mr. Carp.
Mr. Penning, good
Nice
to see
you, mate.
How's things?
Very good, thanks, fella. It's humid, isn't it?
It is warm, very warm.
Most of you guys will know Simon Scott from previous shows and his exploits with me on Farlows, Blue Pool, shows like that. Anyone who hasn't seen Simon before, you're in for a bit of a treat. He's very entertaining and he's also very good at catching carp. Renowned in the fishery field as a consultant, as a fish farmer. You're a scientist, a lecturer, and a well-travelled expert carp angler, and a good mate of mine. So anyone who hasn't seen Simon, that's a bit about him. We're at the Yateley North Lake, so I mean, it's iconic.
Yeah, a very famous lake indeed, Adam. It's a very special spot. As a youngster getting into carp fishing, I was reading stories in Rob Maylin's books about this place, his guest chapters, and then he went on to fish here himself. And
well, there was an actual book named after it.
Basil's Bush. Yeah, very famous lake, and I've had a lot to do with it as well, because after the big, very famous Yateley carp, Basil died. I was involved in the drain down.
Before we get to that, there's actually a headstone down there. Is that where Basil's resting?
Right. Basil is buried.
The most famous carp deserved a proper grave, I suppose.
Yeah, a real big special carp. And you know, as a kid, as I say, I read stories about Basil and thought I'd like to fish.
Really inspired you?
Yeah. And it's a real cornerstone of British carp fishing. The Yateley complex is, you know, is known throughout the carp fishing world. Anglers know where Yateley is. It's a big place.
Yeah, and also I think it's fair to say, probably or arguably, the best looking carp that the country's ever produced. It's up there, isn't it? It was a stunning fish, but times have moved on. What happened?
Well, the lake was drained after Basil had died. The lake was drained and all the water was pumped out through 6-inch pipes into the river through a series of cages. The old stock were removed and relocated into one of the other lakes on the complex where they could be retrieved later. Right. A lot of tree work was done. A lot of
You're doing this, I take it?
Well, myself and the groups of students and the guys at RMC at the time were doing it. And then subsequently the lake's been restocked. Some of the old fish going back in. Right. Additionally, some of the Sutton strain fish that I'd spawned have come back in here. Right. And I did a netting job at the Blue Pool where we fished and made the programme last year, and we took about 70 carp out of there and moved them here. Those fish now have become some of the big ones. So we netted commons, a couple of commons that were sort of 29, 30 pounders, lovely big long fish, and they've grown on to become 40s now.
Wow, okay. So not only have you netted them, but knowing your Blue Pool record, you probably caught them on rod and line as well.
No, I don't think I did either of those, but I've caught them in a net, so I can tick them off and say I've done that.
For now, though.
For now.
Nice to have them on.
I'd quite like to meet them again, yeah.
So 2 40-pound commons. I think there's 1 40-pound mirror as well.
I believe so, yeah. And a good load of 30s and some real cracking 20-pound fish. So there's a nice stock, maybe 140 fish thereabouts, I understand.
But in a very fragmented and extremely weedy and difficult lake to approach. I mean, for a TV show where we need to catch fish, we might have bitten off more than we can chew here.
Yeah, I think we've definitely gone for it.
Well, we like a challenge.
The lake's only done 1 fish, I believe, in the last week.
Right. Yeah.
So if we can catch one in 3 or 4 days for the cameras, that would be quite something. But you'll catch one. Well, and I can take the pictures.
I know you will. Well, we're properly up against it, but you know, going down to Thorpe or the South Lake or something isn't really Simon's style. He's a big fish angler by nature and thrives on a challenge. So I can see you've got one in front of you. It looks more like Wembley than a carp lake. So specialised fishing. You know, the guys watching this at home are going to be wondering how do you cope with fishing in weed? What do you do? I know you're going to show some of that. The other thing to mention is that we're fishing on completely opposite sides of the lake. It's not social at all, unfortunately, but we've both gone where we've seen carp. There was a group here in front of you last night.
Yeah, indeed.
And the same on the opposite side for me. So we've got fishing. Nothing's happened so far.
No.
I've had my rods wound in for a little while, so I'm going to go back and check some spots I've been baiting. Let's look in here. There's fish about.
Yeah, definitely. They've been coming through. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll catch you later on.
Yeah,
Good
give
luck.
us a shout if you get one.
Be lucky.
Cheers, Adam.
Back at camp, and I haven't got any rods out at the moment, but I've just been up the margin to my right to check a couple of spots, and fantastically we've got fish visiting. They're not really confident at the moment, they're ghosting over the spot, and I found a new spot which is just a little bit further up, which looks equally good. Saw a fish come over it almost straight away, so I baited that as well now, using the extending spoon, managed to poke it through the herbage. One of them's 6 foot rod spot, the other one you could fish more conventionally, but they're both perfectly safe. They're not snaggy or anything, they're just a little bit hard to get to in terms of bankside herbage, but both look good to do a bite. I really fancy my chances now, feel quite fired up. So I've put some hemp and some maples, which I've got as a little mixture in a bucket down on those spots. Interestingly, 2 of the spots have got a branch lying across the middle of them, which indicates that they started their life as a rubbing spot. There's a fish flank on them to clean themselves. Gradually that'll open up and become a big glow area, which is what we've got. They're fantastic spots to feed fish on, so really feel good for a chance maybe later on today. So I'm going to drink this, get my energy back, and I'm going to go and put a rod in.
So here I am on my first swim on the North Lake. The reason I picked this area is that I've seen a fair few fish sitting in the weed bed, particularly out to my left. It's a very, very weedy area, as you can see. It's like a football pitch, but there's obviously a lot of fish here now. I think they're sort of resting up and sunbathing predominantly, but obviously you've got a fish where you see the fish. It's very nice to pick the most comfortable swim, but that doesn't necessarily give you the best chance of a bite. And as we've already mentioned, we're up against it. We've got to try and catch one. So I've got my left-hand rod in this spot out here, which is a big clear, well, I say big, it's about the size of a broiler clear area, and I've had a little couple of casts in there, and it's landing clean on the bottom. When I drag a rig back, I'm not picking up weeds. I'm confident that that's one good spot to fish, and my right-hand rod, I'm fishing out to these clear holes in the weed. Because it's so weedy, it's really important to fish locked up tight, so that the rods can only give a couple of foot of line and that's it, so the fish can't charge off. And I'm using drop-off leads, really, really important, so that once we're in contact with a fish, the leads shed and it gives you every chance of getting the fish back through this heavy weed growth. Now, at the moment, as I say, the fish are sitting up in the weed. I'm going to give this a couple of hours. If things don't look like they're going to happen, then I'll probably go for a bit of a cruise around and see if there's a better angle of attack, maybe a better option for presenting a bait. But it's a good starting point, and as I say, I'm on some fish for now.
And I've got one really good fish, 25 pound probably, feeding at my feet in 2 feet of water on maples and hemp seed. I'm going to get a rod sorted. It's an up close and personal situation, 6 foot stalking rod. Get in there and see if we can bag him. Action stations. I've got a 6 foot rod all made up, a little tiny rig with a tiger nut on it, balanced, landing net, bit of bait and a spoon. That's all I need. If it takes 2 or 3 hours, I don't care. There's a good fish feed in there, so I'm going to go in as quietly as I can, lower the bait onto the spot, slacken the line, sit back and wait, and hopefully we'll nail a carp.
Okay, so it's time to make a move. Although I think this was a good first choice, I now think that possibly a move onto the other side of this bay would be better. I've had fish this morning coming through this really thick weed and dropping on the spot, and I definitely had a fish feeding over my bait. Not much bait out there. I'm disappointed not to get a pickup, but my line lay is probably quite poor because the line's coming in then dropping very steeply onto quite a small spot. I think if I fish the other side of the bay, there's a little less weed over there, and I can fish up to the thick weed without coming over it. The shadow from the trees on the other side there has obviously created a darker area of water, and that's prohibited the weed growth. So I figure that's going to be a better area to try. Certainly gives me better line lay, and I think I feel more confident around there. So I'm going to pack up, get a bit sweaty, push the barrow around the other side and give it a go for the night. Okay, so that's everything set in a new swim. It's been a story today about this stuff and lots of it. Hopefully on this side of the bay I've got a better line layout to the spots I'm fishing, and with a left-hand rod tight to the weed over there where I'd seen fish feeding this morning, and this right-hand rod's fishing down to the right up against the weed. Both rods have gone in nice and clean, both rods have given me a donk and have hit the bottom, so I'm pretty confident with the presentation. The line lay's much better, so hopefully now the traps are set. Fingers crossed.
The end of day one, it's been a really humid, clammy kind of day, and it's just beginning to freshen a bit from the west. Simon's moved, I'm about to move. We've both been on fish, but it's a matter of fine-tuning your approach as the session progresses. It's all about ticking the boxes, ringing the changes and reacting to what's happening around you. Yes, there are fish in front of me, but today I've spotted a golden opportunity in the next swim up, which is only 10 yards away. But I'm going to move everything just up there, which will allow me to position one rod. Only, really, it's a tiny little hole, which I'll show you in a moment, which will give me a perfect opportunity to fish where I've seen these fish feeding earlier.